I just saw you.
How's it going, buddy?
Welcome to Colorado.
Looks like you're a little bit hard at it. Tell me what's going on here today.
Well, you know my favorite part of snowmobiling is riding. However, a close second is the mod shop.
Looks like you got some stuff going on, man. I mean, what are we gonna do?
Well, we got sleds torn apart, we got sleds going back together, but right now it's all about getting customer sleds built, fleet sleds built, and today we're gonna take one of our fleet sleds here at Burandt's Backcountry Adventure and get it tuned up with some Fox shocks. Before we get started, I got to give you a tour. You know, you gave me a tour in Baxter of your guys' facility. Well, let me give you a little tour of what we've got going on right now.
Absolutely. I want to learn a little bit about these sleds that you built.
Okay, so as you can see here, we've got a lot of pretty shiny new snowmobiles. And so Polaris has been kicking butt, delivering brand new 24s. We've got a bunch of customers who had their 22, 23 sleds that wanted to do some mods. And so, like, you know, this is my baby from last year. This sold to a guy up in Idaho. He's coming to get this next week. We've got a couple, this is a brand new 2024 build, a 23 build. And as you can see, you know, it's like, of course you expect to see Fox shocks on my personal sleds, but it's awesome that, you know, customers come to us and say, what are your go-tos and what are your must-haves that we run out on the snow, and that's why everybody is leaving here with Fox shocks.
Well, and the cool thing too is what I see IQS, I see QS3, I see air, I see coil in both. You know, that's the fun part about you have all these different options to ride.
And that's something that we're going to talk about in this video, is really breaking down for the consumer of which package works for them and why. And so as you can see, just like you mentioned, we have a full gamut of different shock packages and types and sleds. All right, Rick, it's time to hammer this out. The most asked question we get all the time is, what is the shock I should be choosing for my snowmobile?
Well, they want to ride like you, so let's go. Let's get it started.
All right, well, so here we go. We got the lineup. We got the 1.5 coil.
Float 3 with QS3.
And then we've got the all electronic adjustable IQS. So the coil, and this is where this is interesting. You know, people think, okay, the coil is the least expensive. Is it going to be the least value? And in my opinion, where the coil really has its home is for the guy who wants that set it and forget it type of setup.
Well, and the cool thing about it is it has QS3, it has a lightweight spring, has the groove bodies, so it has a lot of the same features of all of our other lineup that we're going to talk about.
The coil package is really rock solid.
Let's look at the Float 3, QS3.
This has been kind of the Mac Daddy for a long time, and the reason is you have just a ton of adjustability with the QS3. You have not only the QS3 switch, which goes soft, medium, and then firm, but we also have the main chamber adjustability of air, and then the EVOL chamber.
So when we talk about a spring shock to an air shock, we have two different chambers, and why we do that is to better set it up for your rider weight and your riding style.
And then one additional feature that the air shocks have is rebound adjust, which also really helps the plushness of the shock.
Let's go to the IQS. You know, you always told me, he's like, well, I like to make a lot of adjustments as I'm riding. And I'm like, well, get off your snowmobile. He's like, I can't when I'm going up like this. I said, well, okay, here.
Well, and it's really amazing to think of how far we have come, and thinking about, you know, that we literally have a button on our handlebars that allows us to either be in party mode, which I like to say of keeping the skis light and fun and wheelies everywhere, or get the line done in lockout, which allows this rear suspension to stiffen up, keeping the front end down and winning the line.
Exactly, and going where you want the sled to go.
How I describe it to people is you're going to use lockout 4, 5, 6 times a day with the standard QS3 to get off your sled, switch it to lockout, do your line, come back down. Where on the IQS, you're gonna use it 50 or 60 times a day because you can, and it's easy. So the adjustability at your fingertips of the IQS is like a game changer. However, like if you're looking for the ultimate lightweight package and everything, it's tough to beat the QS3s. Okay, we've got the skid frame pulled out of the snowmobile and the front track shock and rear track shock.
You can also do it in the snowmobile too. You know, roll it on its side. You can pull the shocks out that way too. Can be done also.
Yeah, either method works. I like pulling the skid out. It's just easier to work on the table here, as you can see. Okay, so we've got the front track shock shaft assembly pulled from the stock shock. And so basically what I like to do, just so I can remember the orientation, is you can literally just end up pulling one side off, sliding the shock over the front track shock shaft, and then following the same orientation as the side that we didn't take off of the shaft. Okay, perfect. And then you want to remember the reservoirs of the shocks will be all on the exhaust side of the snowmobile when you put them in. So there's two, for when you guys take the stock shocks off, you got to remember there's one washer on each side that is in between the shaft and the rail. Don't forget to get those in. And then also you'll want to apply a little bit of Loctite to the front track shock shaft bolts. And because I've installed more of these than Rick is why I'm doing these.
It looks like he's really struggling though. So
I'm getting it.
Maybe I should help
There we
him.
go. So what I basically had to do there, you're spreading the rail just a little bit to get that washer in there and then get it lined up. And then with the bolt here. So we got those started there. Another thing to note too, you guys will notice the limiter strap is off right here. We do that to be able to line up the shock to the torque arm, and we'll compress the shock when we get the skid on the ground here to get the limiter strap back on. Now we'll move to the rear track shock. So we'll start and put, we can go into the front torque or the upper torque arm first. Okay, got that lined up. There's a couple holes on this scissor down here. It goes in the hole closest to the shock rod, which you can see down there. Okay, so that's it. Basically, we've got our two shocks in. Now we're gonna put the skid on the ground and we're gonna compress this front track shock and then put our bolt back in for the limiter strap. So this is a process that a lot of people are intimidated about. It's just 4 bolts, guys. One of the trickiest parts is getting the skid back in. One thing to note is the way we do it is I put the front torque arm bolt in first, then move to the rear torque arm bolt on the same side of the sled, and then we're gonna flip it back over.
And when you do that, remember to kind of hold the rear of the sled up so it doesn't fold the skid in the tunnel.
So now the hole is going to be misaligned just slightly. What I'm going to do is push down on the skid here just a little bit.
Too much.
And that helps line that up. And then a little force here. And that's it. 2 people. Again, you know, this took us about 12 minutes to do skid out on the bench, shocks, skid back in. We're going to flip it back over, torque these bolts, and then go have some fun. You guys noticed Rick and I were using impacts on a lot of this stuff. One thing to note, we have done this a lot. Just make sure that those bolts are square and you get a couple turns in with your fingers before driving those things in so you don't get them cross-threaded into the shaft. All right, Rick, we got the stock shocks pulled. Now time to go in with the new ones. Thankfully, you guys have labeled these now.
Make sure you understand right and left, right? You understand what that means?
Now, is this left when I'm sitting on the snowmobile or when I'm looking at the snowmobile?
Sitting on the snowmobile.
Who sits on a snowmobile these days? All right. And then one other thing too, Polaris does have a rubber grommet here that you can take out to gain better access to get the bolt in, but there's enough clearance most of the time you don't have to. So got our bolt in there. Got to lift the A-arm up here just a little bit to get this bottom hole aligned. Very straightforward there. One thing you do need to make sure is don't go crazy tight with this bolt. I have seen a couple guys get a little crazy with the impact wrench and break the bolt in the A-arm. Don't want to do that. That's it. All right guys, a couple things to note. When you are installing your air shocks, for example, one thing we like to do from a setup standpoint is once you take the shocks out of the box and before you install them on your snowmobile, you're going to see in the box, you're going to see this setup sheet. We spend a tremendous amount of time taking your rider weight and putting that on the chart. Setting your shocks to these pressures will give you a great starting point. And a couple things to remember. When you set the pressure in your air shocks, you want to start with the EVOL chamber first, which is the small chamber, and then move over to the main chamber. One thing also that we get a lot of questions is when you put the pump on and you air up your shock, when you unscrew the pump from the shock, you hear the air pressure release. Just remember, that's not releasing pressure out of the shock, that's the pressure that's built up in the hose. So don't worry when you set your air pressure to the recommended setting, example 55, when you unscrew it, that air doesn't mean it deflated the shock, that's just the air pressure in the hose. Rick, talk to him about the preload on a coil shock.
So on preload on coil shocks, we have a very good starting point on that, and roughly about 195 to 210 pound riders where we start with.
With gear. With
gear on, and a helmet, your Avi pack, all that kind of stuff. Again, with your true rider weight. Initial rides maybe is always a little bit stiffer because they're brand new. They need to get broken a little bit. The springs need to get broken. The seals need to get broken. So don't make the adjustments in the shop, go out and ride it. And don't get scared that, oh man, it's really stiff and it's like you gotta ride it a little bit. You gotta break it in.
Well, Rick, this has been a lot of fun. Just got back from Baxter, Minnesota a couple of weeks ago, seeing the whole process of the shocks being assembled. And then to get you here in Colorado in the mod shop here at BBA, throwing a set of shocks on a sled that we get to go on the snow for episode 3.
I'm really excited too to get on the snow with you and ride the shocks that you put together too.
Yeah, hopefully.
I want to see how they feel.
Hopefully that all comes together well.